Welcome back to another Cardinals Off Day podcast. We are recording this in the middle of Game 2 of the Cubs series. So, Ben, I feel like maybe we should record two intros here. So I'll start with we know that the Cardinals have hung on to win the second game of the series. So they got at least 1 out of 3 with the Cubs, and we're feeling good. And now 3-2-1. The Cardinals were swept by the Cubs this weekend. This is the worst franchise in baseball, and everyone involved should be fired. I feel like between those two, Ben, we can, kind of maybe use one of them for where we're at. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that the Cardinals can kiss the SEC championship game goodbye after losing to Pittsburgh, and their college football playoff berth chances are a long shot at this point in time. But also a good reminder of what baseball is like. After the start of the year, and then the pendulum swung, of course, so wonderfully to the good side of things. And then it swung back once again in Pittsburgh. A rough trip, and so. But even good teams, I think the Giants got swept at home by the Marlins, and the Cardinals are kind of like right there with the Giants. And all of this has also served to remind me, Ben, that the expansion of the postseason berths has, I think, changed what it means to be competitive, but it hasn't changed what it means to be a good team. And I think the Cardinals are a competitive team, which of course is the DeWitt talking point. And I don't really know that they are that good. Like they would be on the outside looking in terms of the postseason, any season before the expanded postseason, basically. Except maybe 2006 when that NL Central stunk.
Yeah.
But like,
I was gonna say, I feel like that 2006 team, we always have to strip some of these things as Cardinals fans, because I think it would be reasonable for someone who watched the majority of the 2006 offseason to say, I'm not sure this Cardinals team is a good team.
Yes.
So, but it is interesting. I mean, and we've seen, I also think when we talk about the expanded postseason, like, what are we even talking about at this point? Like, there's been so many, changes to it. And so, I mean, there's definitely, you're like, just the two league winners play each other time. And then even just the division winners are in era. And back then it definitely felt like, the first one actually even just predates you and I. Like, we don't even remember that. But even even the division winner era, you definitely didn't feel like there were any. I don't ever remember feeling like, there's a postseason team that's not like a good team, right?
Right.
And as the wild cards have grown, it's interesting because I think our understanding of what teams get in has not necessarily adjusted our gut feeling for who is a good team. Like, I feel like we probably need to adjust down our criteria, for a good team, but also, as you said, baseball just makes it tough because it's such a long season. And so even good teams, you'll see just horrible series like the Pittsburgh series, whether or not this Cardinals team is a good team and everything. We would recap from game 1 of this Cubs series, all of the various home run records that were set, both by the Cubs and the Miles Michaelis giving up home run records. But we do try to keep this podcast under an hour, so we're not going to do that. So maybe we'll save that for a future time. But Ben, in the interest of getting things rolling, what have you learned?
I have learned that it's always John Mozeliak's fault. At the start of this offseason, they had that press conference where he very clearly communicated payroll's going to go down. We're gonna cut payroll. And then he declared it a runway season. He specifically identified Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman as players who need runway, and then made an effort to trade Nolan Arenado, and even said priority 1, 2, and 3 were doing so. Got a list of teams from Nolan Arenado that were okay for them to work a trade out with, and had a trade with the Astros on the 1 yard line that Arenado ultimately vetoed. And that put the Cardinals in a tough position because that left, I believe it was like 4 teams, and none of them were really too interested in him. And so that immediately made Nolan Gorman's runway much more difficult to finagle. And through the first, basically half of the season, we've heard a lot of, or at least heard and seen a lot of criticism about how there's a logjam on the roster, and it's difficult for Oliver Marmol to achieve the runway for the players who need a runway. But then over the last couple weeks, injuries have hit, and they have a lot of games in a condensed period of time, and you're seeing players that make us seem like the opening to Major League, like, this guy's dead, like, who's this guy? And they're needing to play these guys because they have players on the injured list and players who are day-to-day with ailments. And it's been a tough go for them, but now you see this criticism that they don't have the depth that they need. And it's left me wondering, how many Major League teams have the depth that they need if like 3 of their top 5 hitters are dealing with health issues. And, I'm kind of the opinion, not very many. And so, in a lot of ways, it just feels like it always gets pushed up to Mozeliak, even though a lot of his decisions are due to the orders that ownership gives him. And I feel like ownership escapes a lot of criticism. But then also, the manager does have to manage a little bit more creatively and a little bit more deftly when you do have more talent on the roster than is typical. And then also has to hope that they get a little bit lucky and be a little bit more deft in how he's handling the players and matchups and that type of thing when you're dealing with injuries. And so, but what I have learned is, I don't know what the St. Louis media establishment is going to do when they don't have John Mozeliak to kick around anymore.
Yeah, I hear you, Ben. And I don't even want to get into this, but I'm really fascinated to see how soon it's going to take in the Chaim Bloom era for folks to realize how many things, how many issues persist that are based on ownership and payroll and all of these other factors and don't change even with someone else there. But saving that for another time. No, it's funny. I almost an identical in terms of what I've learned. I think in some ways this Cardinals organization remains too good at competing. Like, they've always emphasized they want to compete. And so even in this year where they said it was going to be about runway, they essentially made 0 off-season additions. They've still, despite themselves, been pretty competitive. And like that's kind of put them in a little bit of the situation they're in right now. And I think, there was a point where we were like, we don't know if this team will be competitive at all, because even if this team is healthy, we don't know if there's enough talent here, to produce a successful season. We've learned by this, midway point and beyond of the season that there is, when this team is fully healthy, they're a competitive team, and they are in the mix for one of those, wild card spots. But when they're not at 100% health, they are not competitive because there is not that depth there, and largely that's because they. Of all the reasons you said, and that, again, most said going into the season, this was going to be about runway. This wasn't about, well, let's backfill some useful veterans that, like, we know we'll need eventually. Those guys aren't there. And it reminds me a little bit of, I watch Premier League soccer, and one thing you see in just all the kind of top European soccer leagues, those teams that finish in the top year over year, they're built differently than the rest of the teams are, because they're going to have to play in, their league. They're going to have to play in all the cups, but then they're also in, the Champions League or something like that. So those top teams, they have the really good ones. They basically have 2 full kind of starting lineups worth of players. They have like that much depth built into them, and the other clubs don't. And it's interesting. You'll see it manifest. Like, I think the most direct way you saw this was when the crazy outlier year when Leicester City won the championship, and Leicester City somehow managed to have enough guys for like a Premier League competing squad. But then, of course, that next year, when they had to go and play in the Europa or the Champions League, excuse me, as well, they were totally cooked. And I mean, there were other factors as well, but that was just a part of it. Was that club was obviously not built to do that. So I'm making this extremely long soccer analogy by way of saying it's a little bit similar to what the Cardinals have. This is a team that was built to have enough guys there when they're all healthy that they can be competitive, but not beyond that. So, we'll see, and we'll see what that bodes over these next few weeks in terms of what they do at the trade deadline, because they are close. And I think there's a version where, they do add just a couple depth pieces and it keeps them competitive. But whether or not that's the optimal move organization wise, I think only time will tell. So with that, Ben, let's dive into some questions here.
Also, though, I want to, with respect to your analogy, did Leicester City carry 3 goalkeepers on it? No, I'm joking. Like it is also one of those things, though, like with Ivan Herrera, where it's like when you have those 3 catchers and then you have a couple of everyday players go down, it really does. You see why more teams aren't in that position, even if Ivan Herrera is basically transitioning to a full-time DH. It also shows why that has become less common, where they're using the DH just more as an opportunity to get guys a day off in the field, and it's not a position that one player has, it's one that's filled with multiple players, because when you get in a situation like that, it does make it a little bit more difficult to respond to injuries, and I think that's been pretty interesting to see the last couple weeks.
Agreed, although at the same time, I'd say in some ways this year, I think it's mattered less them carrying the 3 catchers, because it's like, who is the piece that is not on the major league roster because of that? Because once you get past the guys that were kind of the A team on that 26-man roster, it doesn't really matter if it's Fermin, it's a JC, or it's just a whole bunch of guys that are below major league quality players. So it's kind of so it's maybe it hasn't even had as much impact as it had in years past, but we'll see. All right, first question comes from Cole Morris on Blue Sky. It's to do with our old friend Miles Michaelis. He asks, "What are the chances of Turd Ferguson getting DFA'd sometime this season? Please tell me it's at least 90%. I do feel like we have to always give Will Leach the shout out for coining Turd Ferguson. It's an amazing nickname. We use it, but I just want to make sure folks know that we did not come up with it.
And it also is perfect because it's from the era when Miles Michaelis' humor is from.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like it's great because it captures his persona, but it's even like he's out there making these jokes that like we understand because we're old, but we also aren't man children who are still making jokes like when we were in our early or mid 20s. Like we've grown up a little.
Ben, if you had been in a coma from like the late 90s or whenever the end of that run of those Celebrity Jeopardy sketches were, if you had been in a coma since then, you came out of that coma and you asked me to tell you about the modern St. Louis Cardinals, and I said, well, there's this one pitcher that we all refer to as Turd Ferguson. Then when you saw Miles Michaelis, you would understand exactly who that was. Like it would exactly match your expectations for a pitcher that we refer to as Turd Ferguson. But nickname aside, what do you think about his DFA? Is it at that 90% mark?
I don't think that it is. I think, and we've talked about this, like he has a very small margin of error, and there are going to be very ugly starts, and the 4th of July was a very ugly start. And because it was so ugly, the Cubs had a lot of fireworks. I had to work in my fireworks pun there off the bat. And it was very ugly. Pitching in Wrigley Field in particular for Miles Michaelis, I feel like is a bad situation. Like in July, Wrigley Field, Miles Michaelis, terrible idea, right? Like, but it's one of those things where I think that there is a chance that he gets DFA'd, but I think that the Cardinals know that they're going to get starts like those from Miles Michaelis.
Mm.
After all, they've been getting them for 2 years.
Yeah.
And they know it's because Miles Michaelis isn't good. He did organize, a couple years ago. He successfully got the manager and the president of baseball operations to blame Wilson Contreras for it. But now we all know it's Miles Michaelis' fault. But I think if he's still, if it's something where they're getting 3 competitive starts and 1 just implosion start, I think he keeps his roster spot. And the reason I think that, Ben, is I think Eric Fetty is the bigger problem. I think he is much closer to being out of the league. He makes so many non-competitive pitches, like, in every way. I can barely stand to watch him pitch. It's so ugly. And not that I enjoy watching Michaelis, but like Fetty is very bad, and they have a double-barreled problem, and only McGreevy can only replace one of them. So if you DFA one, that means that you are committing to the other, and I don't think they're going to DFA Michaelis to commit to Fetty.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't quite share your level of Fetty hate. For me, he and Michaelis are still just like 1 and 1A. Like, I really I couldn't make any meaningful praise or criticism of one that didn't apply to the other. But I think you're 100% right. And I think actually something that you said a couple shows ago, it's because the thing is, everybody talks about McGreevy and McGreevy coming in, but the problem is it goes beyond McGreevy. Because I think if it was just as simple as bringing McGreevy in from Michaelis, I think, they would do that. But the problem is there is nothing, and I mean nothing, behind McGreevy. And so, like, as soon as you have an injury, if they've brought McGreevy in and they've DFA'd Michaelis, I mean, there's literally no option behind them, and you would be like desperate to have a pitcher of the quality of Miles Michaelis like back in this organization to take those starts. I think we're all still maybe somewhat hopeful that Matthews is able to come up and pitch this season. I mean, he's the one other kind of guy who could be an upgrade, and I believe definitely has the potential to be a good major league pitcher. But with the injury and then the kind of just being a little behind, I don't know that he's there yet. And he, even if I'm very bullish on him long term, very, very far from a sure thing in 2025 to make the roster, let alone to come up and succeed in his first go round, which is very hard to do even for players that ultimately are quite good pitchers. I mean, Ben, who even is the next man up? Like, I don't even know at this point.
I mean, it's probably after McGreevy, it's probably Graceffo, but does anyone want that? You know what I mean?
Right,
like,
but yeah, or it's probably I guess it's Mats, like say like
yeah,
stretch Mats out to get like 4 innings or something. But I mean, these are terrible options, and so I'm with you. I guess to the question about what's the odds that he gets DFA'd, I would just also say there are some steps there, and the one step the Cardinals are big fans of that I always point out is the gentleman's injured list move. And so I think, and as much as we don't love Miles Michaelis as both a performer and a personality around here, he has spent enough years with the organization that he is someone that they would do that level of respect to. So I would imagine if it comes time for him to exit, there's a good chance that they do that thing where he kind of, especially if we see like this Cubs implosion start, if we see a few of those in a row, I would assume he kind of does that. He moves to the injured list thing with a sort of like non-specific like arm tiredness thing. And maybe he just kind of stays there for the year. I mean, that was how Matt Carpenter's career ended as a Cardinal. That was how Johnny Peralta's career ended. I don't think they ever did release Peralta, did they? Or maybe they did. I don't remember.
I think they did. I think he ran out, maybe and they ultimately did. But I mean, I see where you're going. But as you say, so they call up McGreevy, but then what do they do if Liberatore hits a wall and needs time off? What do they do if Palante does, or if there's another injury? The pitching hangover throughout the organization is such that there's not much depth. For all the talk of the lack of depth among position players over the last couple weeks. Heaven forbid they have some starting rotation injuries, because then we're going to get a
Yeah.
lesson in what lack of depth like really is, because it's going to get pretty dicey pretty quickly.
Oh, for a Jake Woodford. That's where they will be at that
They
point.
could have signed
So
him. He just
yeah,
opted out of his minor league deal with the Cubs and signed a major league deal with the Diamondbacks. So
yeah.
he's still chasing the dream, and best of luck to him. But you're right. I mean,
Nice,
not
nice
having
move,
him.
Mo.
I mean, he would fit right in, right? Like the three amigos:
Yeah.
Fetty, Michaelis, and Woodford. Uh,
Oh man. Yeah.
and then maybe they could have John Gant come back, and he could just be like the manager of their stable. They could talk about
Yeah.
throwing 90-mile-an-hour fastballs on the black,
Yes.
and trying to induce ground balls.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right. Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's move on to our next question. Our next question is from Dan Chibnall, who does our social media, friend of the pod, also joined us on the movie episode we did earlier this year. Recently, Cardinals hitting coach Brant Brown was interviewed on a St. Louis ESPN radio show talking about hitting philosophy, approach, changes hitters have made, etc. It was a refreshing interview because it gave us a glimpse inside the black box of Major League coaching. Are there other specific people or positions within the organization that you would like to hear from who might offer a similar glimpse without just spouting stuff about one game at a time or winning mentality? Ben, anyone you would like to hear from?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting question. I think the answer is a little bit of a two-part thing because, on the one hand, there's the like, who do you want to hear from? But then, as Dan kind of alludes to there at the end, there's the like, just individual personality thing of like, who really opens up and kind of like gives you the real story versus like who doesn't. And there's a lot of major league coaches that choose not to kind of reveal everything, and I get it because like there is always some level of maybe competitive advantage thing that's that don't necessarily want to talk about, etc. So with those two caveats, the I think the person I'm most interested in hearing from, and he did actually do a really good interview. I want to say it was on the like Cardinals. Oh, what's the name of that official Cardinals
Cardinals Insider.
podcast? They put a Cardinals
Cardinals
Insider
Insider.
because it sounds like I'm going to say Rob Serfolio because he's
Yeah.
he's the guy that and that was very good. But I would like to continue to hear from him, especially because I think that's the real change that's already underway. Is the like what is the whole player development philosophy and what's happening internally in terms of how they're evaluating guys, how they're setting up programs for guys to move forward, etc. That is, and I so hearing from him, I think would even more from him would be very fascinating. I think this year's draft could be fascinating in that regard as well. I mean, Heim was here last year, so there was probably some input there, but like, it will be really interesting if we, see a change here, right? Do they, not take certain, advanced college arms, for example, right? Like that would be a major change. So I think that's the main one for me. Ben, how about you? Who do you want to hear from?
I think that uh, the most interesting interview, and I don't think we would ever get it, but it would be, you know, an interview, and you're talking about opening up, and there's absolutely no motivation for Bloom to give an interview. Like Mozeliak is
Yeah.
still here and in
Right.
charge.
Yep.
Like, but I would love, he did, I think they called it an audit of the organization. And I would love to hear an interview
Yeah.
about what are the things that he thinks that they need to do. What were they doing that was that was not optimized, and where
Yep.
does he see as the biggest areas for improvement? And I think very
Yep.
clearly we know what that is because it was very clearly pushed out into the media that we fed the major league payroll and starved our player development operation, and we don't have enough traveling instructors. We don't have we have someone who's in charge of player development who just is
Mm-hmm.
behind the times, and that's very
Yeah.
clear. Like we've been able to see that, but I'm more interested. Like, what is he doing now? And what I assume he's helping get ready for the draft, of course, and probably
Right.
helping get ready for the trade deadline because
Yep.
whether they're trading away players to add prospects or they're going to add players and trade away prospects, those have future consequences, and I think he would be involved in that.
Yep.
But aside from those two immediate things that happen every year, he's trying to help remold this organization into what he wants to see. And I would be really interested, in particular on the pitching front, like what does he think the organization what was the approach and how does he see it improving moving forward and how does he hope to accomplish that? I think that would be a fascinating interview. Unfortunately, I don't know how realistic that type of interview happening would be. Um,
Yeah. You know what's funny, Ben, is as soon as you said that, I was like, oh my God, that's the obvious answer. Of course it's Heim Bloom, but like it is such a non-possibility that I somehow like eliminated it from my mind.
yeah,
Even
it
if it was
wouldn't.
even in this hypothetical, it could be any one thing.
The
But yeah, you're right.
and along those same lines, like if you could get Bill DeWitt Jr. to go
Mm-hmm.
do an interview, and not one of these where they call him Mr. DeWitt and oh
Mm-hmm.
shucks, it's just great you're taking the time to talk to me, that type of thing. Like asking real questions, like
Yeah.
and pressing
Although,
him a little bit. I think that would be very
yeah,
interesting, and not just about the Cardinals, like about Rob Manfred and about the collective
right.
bargaining agreement and
Oh
getting
yeah,
into some of these, like the lockout, like you locked the players out.
yeah,
You did that.
yeah,
The owners
yeah,
did, and like, and
yeah,
kind of getting into some of the because he is an influential owner major league wide, and even talking about
yeah,
the A's situation. And
yeah,
like
yeah,
I would be very interested to hear his thoughts on some of these larger issues facing the game, and then also his thoughts on where the Cardinals are and how he feels about that. I think that would be
yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I have to say, it's interesting. He doesn't do a lot of that, but when he does, like I have actually sometimes found him to be kind of surprisingly forthright, and I think it's kind of the like just that sort of like billionaire privilege of like like he don't
Yeah,
have to hide shit from anybody.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
honestly,
That's right.
I really felt like it was his presence in that end of year press conference last year that made it a little abrasive. Like people found it kind of abrasive,
Yeah.
and you know what I mean. And I feel like
What?
he was pretty straight in terms of how he feels. He definitely like bristled a little when people had certain kinds of criticism, but like that bristling was an example of like being kind of more unguarded and just like that was his honest reaction. So yeah,
It
no, he would be a fascinating one. Go ahead.
But it was really wild. Like the Bills DeWitt would not say that they were going to
Yeah,
cut payroll. They're like, well, we don't know that yet. And John Mozeliak's like, oh,
yeah,
we're cutting payroll. Like
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me qualify my comment about billionaires being open unless they talking about their money and then they ain't saying shit. So like he definitely had that going for him. But Mo is the other one. Like I would love for like 6 months after Mo has left the organization to see like a really high quality like magazine level kind of sit down with him where he does kind of say the quiet part loud about just what it was like, why certain choices he's made over his tenure, why and how they were dictated by ownership. Because especially given his tenure in this kind of a role, I just really think it would shed a lot of light into how these, how the dynamics of these relationships at really every major league club.
Oh yeah, it definitely would. And I think that he and the DeWitts are on the same page and have been.
Right.
Like I don't think there's
Yeah.
a lot of space between. Now, sure, would he like more money? Oh, of course, that's a given,
Yeah.
right? Like I would like to have my cake and eat it
Yeah.
too. Like
Right.
I'm not
Right.
saying that, But I'm saying I think that they felt that they had teams that could maybe win a World Series, and they decided we're going for
Yeah.
it. And I think in particular, at the end of Yadier Molina's career, at the end of Adam Wainwright's career, then you signed Pujols, like those types of
Hmm.
things. I can understand that mentality as well. But like really understanding, it would be very interesting to have more detail about. He is frequently described as a hands-on owner, Bill DeWitt Jr. But like,
Yeah.
what does that mean for John Mozeliak? I think that would be
Yeah.
very interesting to learn more details in that regard.
It would make a great book, like a conversation with both of them, basically just about what is how has the business of baseball changed and evolved over the last 25 years. And I think those two talking about that would be maybe the two best voices that you could have really kind of explain that, given their tenure and all of the success that the Cardinals had during that, etc. All right, well,
It would be
move
the
on.
the oral
Okay.
history of the. Oh no, I was just saying, like like the oral histories of movies that are always so good. Like
Yeah.
20 years later, where no one
Yeah.
cares
Yeah.
anymore, like who they offend.
Right.
Uh, there was
Right.
just a
Yeah.
really good one on What About Bob uh, that I really enjoyed.
Oh,
Uh,
I haven't read that. I'd love to see that.
It,
So,
that's a good
um,
one, but like I'm just thinking,
yeah.
like who else besides DeWitt and Mozeliak could you like Mike Matheny? You get Matheny in there, and
Yeah.
maybe Yadier Molina gives his 2 cents, and Randy Flores or something. I don't know, but anyway,
Yeah. No,
uh,
that's a good. It's interesting. It's a good idea. All right. So moving on. The wallet inspector, a frequent question asker, who's following his dictum to not ask any Michaelis questions, although we had one earlier, so we still kind of covered that ground. So the meat of his question here is: do you think this season and future outlook convince one or more of the pitch to contract veterans to relent on not agreeing to a deal? I'm specifically thinking about Wilson, given that he's taken to the media to beg for help with his hit by pitch issue. I'm not one to advocate headhunting, but I think you can send a message about 99 on the hands of Contreras without endangering livelihoods. Ben, I don't know. What's your take?
um, we have talked about Wilson Contreras being a genuine pro athlete psychopath. Um,
Yeah.
And I will start this off by directly with respect to 99 on the hands. The next batter that a Cardinal pitcher faced in the Tony La Russa era would have been beamed, uh, like around the ass, right? Like in that
Yeah.
area. And then Tony La
Hmm.
Russa would have, we would have had some yelling and that type of thing. And, he would have made a stink about it and made his point. And that was a pet peeve of La Russa's. You can't throw up and in if you can't control it because you're messing with people's livelihoods.
Hmm.
And I've never gotten the impression that Oliver Marmol attempts to police anything in any way. So there's a definite gap there, and I can understand doing that. I think that tit for tat is silly, but I think if you do one that's just an obvious, like, hey, don't do that, um,
Yeah.
I think that's okay. I don't think that Contreras wants out of St. Louis, and in fact, we were just talking about Miles Michaelis blaming him and John Mozeliak and Oliver Marmol joining on Team Michaelis against Contreras, which I actually think, frankly, made Wilson Contreras one of the most popular Cardinals players because everyone felt he was being, uh, unfairly scapegoated. And so I really do feel like, we were just talking. You had the good fortune of watching The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls documentary, and the internet meme. I took that personally. I feel like Wilson Contreras probably turned down the no trade clause, and in his mind is like, I will be a St. Louis Cardinal after you are. Like to
Yeah.
John Mozeliak and Oliver Marmol, like, no, you're going, I'm not going. And so I would be surprised if he waived his no trade clause to leave because I feel like he's going to be here longer than Miles Michaelis. He's going to be here like in his mind, he has taken it personally, and he's going to make this, he's going to win in terms of the internal political dynamic of the clubhouse and the organization. So that would surprise me. Is there a player who you think might agree to leave?
Well, not. I mean, honestly, like who else is there other than like Arenado? Right? I mean, I don't think that. I think it's kind of everybody else is, unless there's somebody else I'm missing. People are coming to the end of contracts, or they're still in that kind of
Sonny
club
Gray, do
control
they
world.
have they have one
Yeah, Sonny
year?
Gray has at least. Yeah, he has at least one more year. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, but I don't think they want to get rid of Sonny Gray, and I don't think Sonny Gray wants to go. So, yeah, it's it's this is kind of, and this is one of those reasons that I think the Cardinals were set up for this potentially for this kind of quick rebuild. Is they're not like some of these teams that when they've gone into sort of a rebuild cycle, have like just half a dozen albatross contracts. So yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't see it being a big issue. I think it's going to be really fascinating what happens with Arenado going forward because, you know, he. I mean, it really just comes down to him. I think you know what I mean. Like, if he doesn't
Yeah.
want to go, he's not going. And also, he still is playing at a high enough level that, like, if he insists on staying, like, that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, they'll just kind of they'll work around that. It's not like, well, geez, we got to just like either cut him and eat it or like creatively like restructure everything. It's like if he sticks around, it's fine. so so yeah, I don't know. I think that'd be my thoughts on that.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're in a similar situation with him at the trade deadline as they were in the offseason. If this
Hmm.
downturn that they have kind of been on, uh, they it
Yeah,
seems like they're kind of hitting a wall. And I wouldn't be surprised when you look around. I mean, I think the Yankees could use a third baseman. And if the Yankees are inquiring about him and you can get a couple interesting pieces and they're going to eat most of the contract. I mean, I was joking with my wife early in the year, like all of his like pads and everything were navy and like
right.
and now they're all red and like neon yellow and like it's like, "Oh, he ordered all of his Nike stuff to be Astros or Red Sox or Yankees colors. That he did not order them, even though that is a Cardinals color. It's not really a primary color in their scheme right now.
Sure.
And now he's someone else. He's got good swag too. Like he's got cool batting gloves. He's got like he clearly
Yeah.
personalizes it, right? And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, but now he's got all the Cardinals color stuff. Like it
Yeah.
feels like he's like, oh no, I'm gonna be here. I've got my Cardinals stuff on, and but like
You know, you,
if they're
and I have
third,
what.
oh go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, we've long talked about Hug Watch around the
Yeah,
trade deadline, right? I think you're bringing us Gear Watch here, and I love it. Like, like,
no, the
like, why is
start of the
this guy?
year,
Why
man.
why is everything orange all of a sudden with this guy who's they're talking to the Giants or the Orioles about
Yeah.
trading? Yeah, I love it.
But it's like at the start of the year, I was like, this is really weird because this is not even like like the trend is toward yellow, like Ivan Herrera and Wilson Contreras.
Yeah,
Like it didn't even fit like kind of where the players are going with Cardinals colors. Um,
yeah,
but like if they're like in third place for the last wild card and like 3 games out, and the Yankees, have a decent offer on the table, does he leave?
yeah, yeah,
I think he probably does, but I don't know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. That'll be an interesting one to follow for sure.
All right, moving on to our next listener question, and this is a very interesting one. We do not often get asked for parenting advice, but we're always looking to explore new territory here on Cardinals Off Day, and what better way to do that than with a movie question? And Jake Wright asks, I just watched The Sandlot with my kids on Disney Plus. They liked it. And when it was over, Disney Plus immediately suggested some crap direct to video sequel made 15 years later. Of course, my kids want to watch it because they don't understand direct TV sequel 15 years after the original is a huge red flag. is there a way I can impart the crucial life lesson, don't watch direct-to-video movies like this, to my kids? Or do I need to resign myself to them learning from experience and possibly souring on The Sandlot as a result? Is there a risk that at some point I'll be stuck watching The Miz in the Marine 5?
Yeah, well, first off, I think you and I would both agree watching The Miz is always pleasurable. The Miz is a wonderful, wonderful character in our world. Okay, I haven't seen the Marine Five. That's alluded to here, or maybe some of the Miz's other film work. So it may not be as strong as his wrestling work. But setting that aside, Ben, it's very funny. This question, I don't know if you even know quite how specifically this fits into my wheelhouse, and actually relates to both of our children
Yes.
because I don't know if you ever knew this full story, but gosh, a few years ago, your son and my son also are good friends, and your son and one other young man were over here for a sleepover with my son, and very similarly, they had all seen The Sandlot before, of course, and somehow stumbled onto The Sandlot too, and so they did start watching The Sandlot too, and about two-thirds of the way through it, my son got sick and threw up, and at the time, I think the assumption was he had a little bit of like kind of a stomach bug, but I really think it could have very well been The Sandlot too. And so it was, a situation where like the sleepover canceled, like other kids had to be like sent home, etc. So um, I think where I'm going with that is, I think you have to let your kids watch the direct to video sequels and just trust that they will just vomit as a reaction to it, and then understand going forward how terrible these things are. I think sometimes, unfortunately, you just have to let your kids like learn these horrible lessons on their own. But I don't know, Ben. Do you have a different take on what to do?
Well, it's a lot harder in the streaming era with the algorithm where you know, the machine is pushing things on your children and it's a click of a button away
Sure.
instead of like at
Yeah.
the movie store where like the name brand stuff has the front
Right.
of the
Yeah.
case facing out, and then everything else they would have to read the side, and it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
here's Aladdin, here's a Return of Jafar. We aren't
Yeah.
watching that. We're but we
Yeah.
have hit that a few times with the algorithm, and uh, I'm like, if you want to watch it, that's fine. We ran into it with Angels in the Outfield too, and it was around the
Oh.
time they watched the Sandlot, and we didn't make it all the way through because he's like, "This is terrible." And as Lane has watched and aged more, um, they know what's good and what isn't. And
Yeah.
I also have found it helpful, Ben, that even when they're young, to ask them what they like about the movie and what made it good,
Yeah.
and have a conversation with them about it to help them identify what's good and not. So you aren't going to, Despicable Me 7 in the theater
Yeah.
or whatever, uh,
Hmm.
because they kind of understand, like, once you get down the line in a lot of these series, and back in the 90s it was usually the direct to video sequel was a hallmark of
Yeah.
successful kids movies. um,
Yeah.
and so I have also, I have taken to saying, like, this movie is not good, I've watched it, and I don't think we should watch it. And when
Hmm.
the first time you say that to your child, like, generally you try to be positive as a parent, but then when it's like, this is bad and I don't want to watch it, they like look
Right.
at you like, oh, this is bad. I'm like, no, the first one's really good, but the second one is
Yeah.
not. And it's
Yeah.
even like we let our uh, 3.5, almost 4-year old watch Lilo and Stitch, the original animated version. And there's like a
Hmm.
TV show and some other thing, like, and I didn't even know these things existed.
Oh,
Um,
right. Yeah.
and then of course you also have the soulless CGI remakes of all of these,
Right.
classics, and that you have to navigate as well. And I've just started telling them, like with the Lion King, the we took our oldest to the Lion King CGI, and we all were just like, "This is terrible," and we left in the middle of it. And we haven't gone
Yep.
to one of those CGI remakes since. And our 3-year-old has started getting into more like movies. Like we have a movie night,
Yeah.
and he wants, we just watched Beauty and the Beast, and then of course it's pushing the remake of it, and he's like, "What's that?" And I
Right.
was like, "It's nothing. What you just watched is so much better than it. They remade it." And
Yeah.
he's like, "Why?" And I was like, "To make money." That's the only
Yeah.
reason. There's no
Yeah.
artistic merit to it. And he was like, "Oh, okay." And so I've already
Yeah.
planted the seed with our 3-year-old in the hopes of avoiding the direct to video conversation and the CGI photorealism conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I guess just maybe to kind of wrap up on the parenting aspect of this, there's just a reality too where like your kids your kids don't think that you are cool, and nor should they. Like, did any of us think that our parents were cool? And so there are just certain things that like they're not going to listen to you on. I think about my older son who's just graduated from high school. Like I think about music, and there's a lot of music that like I listened to and I like wanted him to like. He did not particularly like, largely because that was like dad's music, so that
Yeah.
wasn't cool. I will say, as he's gotten older and kind of recent like adulthood, he has come around on some of that music, like because eventually he did listen to it and kind of like took it on its own merits. But at a certain point, I think just in general, it's best to just accept like, you know, me, the parent, like emphasizing how cool this is or how bad this is. Like that's not as compelling as you think it is
Yeah.
because like, who wants to be think all the things are cool that their parents think are cool? Nobody.
No,
So
and especially no child.
yes,
Like when
exactly.
like you have a small window where that works, and then it closes
Yes,
almost
yes.
immediately. And it doesn't matter what you say about Five Nights at Freddy's. It is great cinema.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, all right, Ben. Well, let's go ahead and wrap things up here. Thanks as always to everybody for the questions. So Ben, before we take off, what is something that you are going to be looking for?
I am going to be looking for Jordan Walker health updates, and you have already brought up the gentleman's injured list, and I'm kind of wondering if some time away from Oliver Marmol and the major league coaching staff is something that the organization thinks Jordan Walker needs. Mozeliak uh, made some waves earlier in the year. He identified June 15th as kind of the end of the runway, or at least maybe not the end, but a time when they would reassess. And that has coincided with Walker. He's had a couple of health issues, one an injury and one something with his appendix, according to reports, but not bad enough that he had to
Yep.
have surgery. But so I'm wondering if he's going to get another trip down to Memphis, ostensibly as a rehab assignment. But I think more just to kind of see if he can get his groove back down there before they call him back up. And I think maybe just kind of to let Oliver Marmol go pedal to the metal through the trade deadline to see what they have, and how they
Hmm.
want to structure the roster for the rest of the season, if they want it to be a playoff push, or if it's going to be, okay, Jordan, you're everyday right fielder again, after the trade deadline. And so that's what I'm going to be looking for to see uh, what they do with Jordan Walker between now and the trade deadline.
Yeah. Well, Ben, I don't know if you noticed he is playing in Memphis right now.
Oh, is he? I
Actually,
missed that.
he played for 2 games for Memphis, and now he's actually played 2 games for Springfield. So they demoted him all the way to Double A, Ben, as they think about him. But
So
no,
it is a
it looks like he's
traditional rehab stint then, where they're keeping him close, presumably closer to
yeah,
St. Louis or closer to the big club than, like sometimes Memphis goes
yeah,
somewhere and they're like, we don't want you to be
yeah,
in New
right,
York. We want you to be
yeah,
close to Chicago. But I'm nonetheless interested to see if this turns into something where how are they going to use him? So
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
is he going to be a bench bat or is he still an everyday player? And we've talked about this a lot. They have to have Nolan Gorman heating up is a wonderful development for them because they need someone who can hit the ball out of the ballpark every time he digs into the batter's box. And I think they were
Hmm.
hoping that maybe they had two of those guys in Walker and Gorman.
Yeah.
And they really need those guys. If they had both of them, one lefty, one righty, that would be such a tremendous turn of events for the organization for the next like 3 to 5 years. And so I'm interested to see what they think the appropriate way to use Walker is and what he needs in his development here over the next month before they make decisions at the trade deadline.
I agree. No, it's going to be very interesting to see as well. Ben, in terms of what I'm going to be looking for, I'm actually kind of something from friend of the camp, Kyle Reese. This is something he said actually on a recent episode of Wednesdays with Walton and Reese, which is a great weekly podcast. If you're not listening to it, it's on the Scoops Radio Network feed. And they were just kind of discussing potential promotions coming out of the All Star break, which is something that the organization has often used as a point to kind of maybe advance some players. And Kyle kind of said that. I mean, a big one that's out there is Weatherholt going to AAA because Weatherholt is just destroying AA. Um, and and Kyle's take on it was that it's certainly a very possible, perhaps even likely move. And in fact, he thought that if they didn't move him up after the trade deadline, or sorry, after the All Star break, it likely meant he was going to spend the entire season in Springfield, and they just felt like, he's comfortable there. Like we're just going to kind of let him rake there. But but I think just even expanding beyond that, I think the big thing, I think neither one of us quite addressed the elephant in the room, which is what we're really all looking for is, are they going to add to this team or are they going to like trade
Yeah.
talent away at the trade deadline? And I think that's just a little farther, that's still a few weeks away from us really kind of knowing that. But I do think that moves, kind of some of those minor league moves at the trade at the All-Star break are actually going to be a little bit of a clue to that. Because to me, moving Weatherholt up to AAA, it's not just about moving up to AAA. It's also about kind of teeing him up for, this guy might come up this season, and he might at least kind of get his feet wet this season, right? So that tells us a little something, I think, because we haven't mentioned him specifically, but he is the one other talent that's down there in the minor leagues that's like, yeah, that guy could really be an asset up here, right? Again, not expecting he's necessarily going to be like a all-star the minute he arrives, but I feel confident saying that he is better than Jose Fermin right now, right? And I think
Yeah.
the organization probably knows that too, but obviously completely different player, place in his development cycle, etc. So I think that could tell us something. I mean, if let's say they move a piece of chaff like Matt Koperniak off the 40-man roster, right? I think that also tells you that they're kind of like starting to set the table a little bit for some moves that could be about actually bolstering the major league club. So things like that, just any promotions or kind of changes they make here over the All-Star break, I'm watching that because I really think that could be a window into are they actually going to maybe try to maybe make some acquisitions or some improvements to hopefully compete for that wild card, or are they going to kind of move on? So that's the main thing I'm looking for there, Ben. Last thing I'm just going to throw in here. We mentioned earlier that we were recording this during Game 2 of the Cubs series. Did you happen to have the game on while we were recording?
I did not. I was just following it on game day here on my phone.
So I just feel we have to say, because this is a Yoho Pozo podcast, he hit just a massive 3-run home run to get them the winning run, and amazing bat flip, just amazing all or nothing swing, just absolute beautiful. We definitely entered the Poe zone, and it was amazing. So I hope hope everyone, I'm sure obviously by the time people listen to this, whether people saw it live or they've seen the replay, they will have seen it. But just wanted to give a shout out to Yohel Pozo for giving us yet another magic moment in this Yohel Pozo season.
I'm very disappointed I didn't get to see live footage of him entering the on deck circle. And because watching him with his stout, portly figure get loose to swing a baseball bat in a professional baseball game is a very enjoyable thing. That borders on just watching him actually ply his trade of not striking out, not walking, and always making contact. And today, the contact going very far and being very loud and evening the series in Chicago and the season series for the year against the Cubs, and that'll make the games ahead all the more fun, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, at any rate, that is going to wrap it up for us today. We will be back with everyone next at the All-Star break. We do typically kind of record one All-Star break show. We don't record a show every single day of the All-Star break because we don't want to do that much work, frankly. But we'll definitely be back then. If there are thoughts, anything people want us to talk about at the All-Star break, send us a message. Blue Sky, Discord, definitely two of the best places to do that. Ben, anything else before we let folks go?
No, I hope everyone had a happy 4th of July, and we will be back around the All-Star festivities.
Absolutely. We will be back with you then on the next Cardinals Off Day. We'll see you then.
Go Cardinals!